The HomeTech podcast is supported by you. To find out more, go to HomeTech.fm/support. This is the HomeTech podcast for May 24th. From Sarasota, Florida, I am Seth Johnson.
And from Denver, Colorado, I'm Jason Griffin. How you doing, Seth?
Good. I just had to stop on the day. That's actually my birthday on May. So I was like, oh, that's a weird day.
Well, yeah. I guess, we're recording a couple days ahead of time, but a happy future birthday.
Thanks. Yeah, you don't have to be belated. It's future.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I'm ahead of the game for once. That never happens.
Right. You just have to wait till you get on Facebook and you're see that people had posted on somebody's. I'm like, oh yeah, it was their birthday.
Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah, birthdays.
Birthday.
Dates,
Smurf day. I feel like I've gotten to the age now where they don't mean a whole lot, and mine's coming up in July, and somebody asked me how old I was turning the other day, and I actually had to stop and do math.
Oh, that's my brother. My brother we were talking about that today. I was like, yeah, he took a shot at what I was. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do the math. I can't tell you.
Yeah, you just sort of stop keeping track, but
yeah.
Cool. Well, good to be back in the saddle this week. I appreciate big thanks to Richard Gunther, friend of the show, for filling in last week. We definitely appreciate it. And Seth, I got a kick out of the title of the episode.
I really, really worked on him. I really did. I tried to get him to say Alexa as many times as possible, but he's a pro. He's a pro, and he knew what he was doing. So, I think he could see it coming from a mile away.
That's right. Greg's in the chat room saying, "Welcome to your 40s, Jason." I'm saying, "Don't age me. I'm 37."
I'm somewhere around there. I guess I'll be 38. So yeah, I don't know.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
40s are staring down the barrel of 40 though, for sure.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Well, Seth, before we jump into Home Tech headlines here, which we're going to do momentarily, I'm going to break a sort of a soft rule I try to keep where we don't talk about the weather on the show.
We break that rule quite often.
We break that rule too often, and I'm trying to get better about it. It's so cliched. But I have to say, it's almost June, and we've got snow on the ground here in Denver.
Nice.
So I'm not super thrilled about it. I'm also not too bad. I'm pretty patient when it comes to this. I'm kind of a cold weather person. So I'm just trying to use it as a reminder that pretty soon it's going to be really, really hot, and I'm going to actually be longing for cold weather.
Yeah, I mean it's already 90 here, and it feels like it's 96. It's summer now. We have no rain in sight, so
man.
It's ugh. But you know what they say, Jason? Winter is coming.
You had that one teed up, didn't you?
I did. As soon as I saw you had snow in May, I'm like, well, we got to talk about the thing. So I didn't watch it, but I hear people are. Did you watch the Game of Thrones thing?
I did. I was a week behind, and I'm not going to say too much because I want to be respectful and not issue a spoiler here. I had an interesting experience, actually, a little sidebar. We were a week behind, and I was out in Boston, as you know. We had a partner summit out there for One Vision, and so on two different occasions, I was at a cafe once, waiting in line to get a coffee, and there was a couple behind me started talking about Game of Thrones, and I literally had to turn around, and I was like, I'm a week behind, stop talking right now. And they laughed, and they did. It was kind of a funny moment. But so I don't want to issue any spoilers, but I did. We got back from Boston. My wife and she actually flew out there with the kids midweek, and we had a really nice sort of team week and barbecue and had a great time. And then we flew back on Sunday and did a doubleheader, which we haven't done in a long time. We used to binge watch a bunch of different shows before we had kids. But
I was going to say, when do you have time for that?
Yeah, 2 episodes back to back, stayed up way past my bedtime, paid the price for it the next morning. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was, the ending was out there, but I don't know how else you end a series like Game of Thrones. You have to be out there.
Yeah.
And so
interesting.
It definitely.
I've managed to be spoiler free as well. So and I don't know how long since I'm literally seasons behind, and I don't know if I'll ever.
If you'll manage to get the whole way.
Yeah, I remember watching Seinfeld and Lost. Those are two the two big ones I think that have been kind of in our time frame of watching TV. Seeing those and going, man, okay, yeah, Seinfeld was weird, okay, but Lost, yeah, even that was weird too. But I remember those were huge, the shows are ending, this, that, and the other, and I think Game of Thrones kind of had that hype, but I don't think as many people tuned into it as those other two. Definitely not definitely not Seinfeld. Seinfeld was absolutely massive.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that one I know got a lot of that was sort of a polarizing final episode, and yeah, I haven't read a whole lot online or anything about how Game of Thrones was received, but I certainly was thinking about it after, and I'm like, I couldn't have written anything better. So I don't know. I thought I don't have any better suggestions.
And winter
right?
and zombies and like there you go.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy, but it was Game of Thrones. What do you expect? So it really was like a cultural phenomenon. I think those shows only come around every so often, and you think back to when Game of Thrones first came out like a decade ago. You know, this was a whole different time in TV, and the amount of original content and series and things that we have out there now to choose from is orders of magnitude bigger than it was when Game of Thrones first came out. And this one was really one that I feel like stood the test of time, and it was sort of a cultural phenomenon. So it got to a point where even if you felt like it had sort of gotten out there, and I know a lot of people were like, well, they've totally diverged from the books, and that was a thing, but ultimately, it was like felt like you were. I've watched every season, so I felt like it was sort of part of something. I had to see it through to the end.
Yeah. I was nearly the same with what was it, Walking Dead.
Yep.
And that show just started grating on my nerves, and eventually I was like, I don't care about any of these characters at all. There's not one character that is redeeming in my eyes. Like I used to love them. I used to like, oh, these are great characters, and eventually it was just like, no, just end this, kill them all. I don't care. And we rage quit that show and walked away from it. So.
Rage quit. That's funny. Yeah, Game of Thrones kept me captivated there until the end, so I enjoyed it.
Cool. All right, so what do you say we jump into the home tech headlines?
Let's do it. Lutron announced a clever new accessory which attempts to solve a common problem for Philips Hue smart light users. The Aurora Dimmer is a small button designed to fit over existing toggle switches that simply snaps over the light switch and provides an easy way to access to Hue controls. This keeps the light switch itself locked in the on position and prevents accidentally powering off the circuit, which would render the Hue lights unresponsive. I would have gone with useless there as the word, but either way. The Lutron Aurora is designed to integrate with existing Philips Hue lights and can be ordered now from the Hue website for about $40 and will ship next month. Pretty cool product here.
Yeah, it's better than, tape, I guess.
Yeah, no
Or those
kidding.
little plastic, like, do not turn off the light things you screw over the screws there. Yeah. This looks much better, although only available in white. I have to think like Lutron missed the large almond target market, of toggle switches that are out there. It's gonna look kind of strange on those.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if that's just a sort of a V1 thing, and if they'll come out with additional colors. If assuming they get some traction with it. It's funny. It makes me think back to like when I was still an integrator and the 57 different colors of Lutron. Wall plates and custom keystone jacks, and the joy of working with designers who want different colors in every single room. But I digress. It is interesting that it's only available in white, but I do think at $40 or so, it's a great product. Like that is, to me, is the biggest problem with smart light bulbs is the fact that if your spouse, or we've talked about it a lot on the show, like most of us don't live in homes by ourselves. And for the most part, if you're putting home technology in your house, you've probably got people there who are less sort of savvy or inclined, and they go flip the light switch off, and all of a sudden your smart light bulb is useless. So I think this is a cool sort of solution to that. And like you said, definitely a little bit more elegant than painter's tape.
Yeah, a little expensive, $40 for a button, $40 for a Zigbee button. It's a pricey button.
Yeah.
But I guess if it solves the frustration, the frustration factor is better. $40 is probably worth it, right? Like if you're constantly having someone come in and turn off the lights, putting the little snap-on button over the top of the light switch so they can still turn on off the lights like normal people,
right?
It's only going to increase like how they feel about the system rather than becoming frustrated with it over time.
Yep. One other thing you pointed out, or we should point out, I should say, is it's just a dimmer. You can't do like the RGB controls with this button. Not even sure how they would implement that. Maybe a creative way to do that in the future with a different sort of implementation. But for now, that is something to keep in mind, that color controls is still something you're going to have to do through the app.
Speaking of lighting, smart home brand Savant on Tuesday announced Apple HomeKit support across multiple products, including its circuit breaker companion module, claimed to be the first ever HomeKit product to control circuit breakers. HomeKit support extends to the complete Savant lighting ecosystem that includes smart bulbs, DMX LED light strips, DMX and 0 to 10 light fixtures, plus third-party lighting linked to DMX or 0 to 10 volt controllers that work with this system. The upgrade will allow people to group Savant products with any other HomeKit device in scenes and automations, as well as control them via the Apple Home app or through Siri commands.
Yeah, interesting. This
Awesome.
one, it's a great addition. I am scratching my head a little bit on this one. We were prepping for the show, and this was shared with us by a supporter of the show in the hub, and we appreciate that. I was a little bit curious, like how this kind of flew under the radar, because I didn't catch it in my weekly scan of the feeds, and the only place I can see this reported is Apple Insider. It doesn't appear to be reported on CE Pro or any of the other big sort of traditional industry publications. So I don't know if what the reason is there, if this is maybe just a hint of things to come, or I'm not really sure what to make of that. But it's a really interesting story nonetheless.
It seems like, this is to take the quote from one of our previous vice presidents, the big f***ing deal. Like this should be like leading the headlines over there at CE Pro. But yeah, it's totally under the radar, and I wonder if it's like maybe Apple Insider didn't get on. I don't know. Maybe there's something coming. Like maybe there's more than just Savant coming. I don't know. I can tell you that I use Control 4 and the like unofficial official Homebridge thing. That it's like a open source project that you like run a little piece of software on, and it connects. And some guy wrote a driver and it's a module for it. So like it all works with Control 4. There's some copy and paste you have to do with it. And man, I got to tell you, HomeKit with an actual real lighting control system and an actual real, automation system is just a dream. It is absolutely amazing. And like it's saying here, I can have the little iConnect thing, whatever the little light switch plug thing that I have is, you and I have for the baby light.
Yep.
I can have that in the same like project. I can plug that in anywhere, and I just go to the Home app and I can control it just like I'm controlling the rest of the lights in my house. So it is a really cool setup once you get that up and going, and you can actually, like, now I can be driving down the street and I can say, Siri, open my garage doors, and like my garage door will open.
Yeah.
Like, just driving down the street. So
it's awesome. That's great.
Yeah. It's been fun. And I got to tell you, like, as soon as it hits mainstream, like if there's more that come out of this, like between Savant, Crestron, and Control 4, those are the three that were announced at WWDC last year. Like if there's more to come out of this, like you get Crestron and Control 4 on board, this is going to be huge for HomeKit.
Agreed. Yeah, and it appears to be reported by a couple other hidden wires. I see picked it up, convergentav.net, not familiar with their work, but they've got, in both of those stories, reference Light Fair 2019, which is coming up, I believe. So it appears maybe this was a sort of a Light Fair related press release that came from Savant, and maybe just didn't get picked up for one reason or another by CE Pro. So we'll have to see. But anyways, we appreciate, I want to say it was Mike
Mike Moore, yeah.
Mike Moore over in the hub for passing that along.
Yep, thanks, Mike.
Thanks for the heads up. Moving on here, despite not yet shipping its smart speaker, the Galaxy Home, Samsung appears to already be working on a follow-up to that device. The Verge reports a new FCC filing shows that Samsung has a new Bixby speaker underway, which looks like a smaller version of the Galaxy Home with a shorter body and no legs. I remember the other one has kind of that funky design. It maintains the cauldron-like shape and is likely going to be a tinier, cheaper counterpart to the original.
The original. I had to put that in quotes.
Yeah.
Because it's not out yet.
Air quotes.
I am excited about this, for one thing, because I was joking that whenever the Bixby thing comes out, whenever the Galaxy Home comes out, I'm going to buy that and set it on my, products of shame wall over here.
You're going to just like take it and put it right in the graveyard.
Yeah, I know it's going to end up there. But this is exciting to me because if it's there's a smaller, cheaper version, I'll just get that one and set it up there.
Right. There you go.
Ahead of time. But yeah, I think we should call this one the Baby Bixby. I think that
Bixby.
Yeah, I think that needs to be the name for it.
The name practically writes itself.
It does.
I think the marketing team at Samsung may want to listen to the show.
I gave Apple Siri in a can, and they didn't run with it. So Samsung, if you're listening,
I can't believe it.
Baby Bixby.
Baby Bixby.
Yep. Residio Technologies has acquired energy efficiency technology from Whisker Labs and hired the team behind it. The technology is said to create a thermodynamic model of a home to accurately predict home heating and air conditioning, runtime, and energy use to enable a homeowner to use less energy while maintaining comfort. The acquisition complements the company's portfolio of connected thermostats. Maybe that's where I'm remembering them from. They're thermostats. Let's go search for these.
Yeah. The Residio is a publicly traded company that recently went back in, I think, October of 2018 is what it said. They were a spinoff from Honeywell, and they're their own publicly traded company. And this appears to be some synergies in this acquisition. Certainly, I hadn't heard of Whisker Labs. I had to go check it out. So it's kind of just a sensing and software technology for home intelligence is how they describe themselves. So appears like Residio picked up probably some good IP there. It's pretty complementary to their lineup, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. The New York Times is reporting that the U.S. government is considering adding limits to Chinese video surveillance firm Hikvision's ability to buy U.S. technology. The move by the U.S. would effectively place Hikvision on a U.S. blacklist, and U.S. companies may have to obtain government approval to supply components to them. Hikvision and Dahua Technologies both were specifically cited in a letter to Trump's top advisors last month, which was signed by more than 40 lawmakers. Sidebar, 2 names in there that I have no idea if I pronounced correctly.
I think I got Dahua. That one's right. So if you buy cameras in our industry, like you may not know it, but you're buying one of these 2 companies most of the time, unless you're buying kind of one of like a mainline brand like Mobotics, maybe they're kind of their own thing. But I'll put in our show notes links to this IPVM company or a website that has compiled lists of all of the OEM products that come from either Hikvision or Hikvision and Dahua. Axis is another like real brand of cameras that do their own thing. This is insane. Like you can see all of the there's some like Alarm.com, SnapAV. There's some main brands on here. ADI, WBox, Interlogix, LTS. These are major brands in our industry. And if those were to, I don't know, stop being able to be sold in the U.S., this would be
a big deal.
Yeah. This would be another big effing deal. Dahua kind of in the same boat. I mean, ADT, Amcrest, Bosch cameras, FLIR, Lorex, IC Realtime is a big Dahua OEM. These are some major brands in our industry,
right?
That will get hit by something like this, and it is and isn't like part of that trade war thing that's going on right now. That's costing us like 25% more. I think those are hitting now. But the other part of this is there's some like not civil rights, but like human right type issues in China that are going on, like in one of their provinces, and I think that's what the letter that was signed by 40 lawmakers that it's referencing there, talking about them setting up these crazy like prison cities, which I read this New York Times article on what they were doing there, and you can see like cameras. Like, you'll see a pole with like a camera stuck on every conceivable angle on these poles, just recording all the time. Yeah. And they're just it's insane what they're doing with this, but I think that's what their goal is, to kind of pressure them to stop doing this kind of thing to those minority groups over there. And of course, politics, trade, imports, exports, all that's going to like come into play at this point in time. And man, I can't imagine not being able to purchase one of these 2 brands in the security market right now. I mean, that would be crazy for these 2 to go away.
Yeah, interesting. There's some really interesting dialogue going on in the chat room right now. So just catch people up. Stepping back just a second, Andrew confirmed Resideo is Honeywell's smart home spinoff. It used to be called Honeywell Home, apparently. So if you're familiar with that, that is now Resideo, and again has been spun off to its own private company. And then regarding the conversation about tariffs and trade wars and just this growing sort of rift between, this growing sort of geopolitical rift, and how this is manifesting in our industry. Looks like Don points out that Savant is adding 3.75% to every invoice starting at the end of the month. So that doesn't sound like a huge number, but yeah, that's significant, especially when you start to consider, the amount of business that a lot of dealers do with a company like Savant, and they're just one. That's just one company. So
yeah, well, I mean, we work with a number of manufacturers that have been sending us updates. I mean, we sometimes get them every night as they work with their partners overseas.
Yeah, I'm sure in your line of work, you're hearing about all that.
So we're looking at probably another 10% on most products before they hit wholesale. So yeah, that's, and it's weird. It's some products, not all products. Whatever these tariffs, they don't exactly target certain things, but you can get hit with one product line but not the other. So it's kind of tough to say what's what, but without knowing where these things are made and what materials are made on.
Yeah. So right. Yeah, and I think companies like Savant that have bigger portfolios may choose to take an approach of this sort of approach where it's like we're just going to add a smaller percentage across the board, versus companies that have a smaller portfolio of products, that may just result in an uptick, a more significant uptick on a percentage basis on a smaller number of products, right? So it's really just going to depend on the makeup of the company. And like you said, there's layers and layers of complexity to all of this. So where it all shakes out on the bottom line and at the coalface, as they say, like with dealers on the street, it'll take some time to really for that to all shape up. But we're nearing that threshold where we're going to start to see that here. So be interesting to watch.
It doesn't exactly stop here within the States. I saw that Control4 was I think somebody posted in the hub, or I had seen it in other forums, that Control4 had sent out an email to basically every dealer worldwide saying, price rises are coming. Like it's, and I think they were saying, the UK dealers were like, oh, there's gonna be a price rate raise here too. So, it's gonna be a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, China and the US are pretty big as far as economies go, and whatever happens between those two countries on a political level is going to affect the entire marketplace and the entire planet.
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's like when the U.S. sneezes, the world gets a cold, right?
Yeah.
And that's an old saying.
China
so
too.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's all interconnected, and China especially. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, moving on here. Sound United brands, Marantz and Denon, announced 2 new models for their respective Slimline and X Series AV receivers. Marantz's NR1510 and NR1710, as well as Denon's AVR X1600 and X2600, all come in the sub $800 price range. So really compelling price points there. We can rattle off some of the features here, but I think one of the big ones that I thought was really interesting, they have HEOS enabled on these. AirPlay 2 support I thought was also really interesting. And then one that I thought was really cool that only garnered a single sentence in the CE Pro article, but I think is a really interesting aspect of the story, is they both have remote monitoring built in. They've got Domotes, Oversee, and IHEG support built into all of these receivers right inside. So all 3 of the major platforms there. So really cool. Pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah, some pretty good specs on these two. Like they're all 4K Ultra HDMI support. Got decent power behind them. And yeah, I did like the custom integrator features in there, especially those like the remote management stuff and that's built into it as well, like Domots. Yeah, I was surprised. Domots, Oversee, and IHEG, kind of the big 3 that we think about. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit further down the road here, but
yeah, it transitions nicely into our next story here. But sticking on this one for another minute, it does look like we had a little bit of an error. So one of them is in the sub 1,000. So some of these do actually nose up over 800, but still, pretty compelling price points if you're in the market for an AV receiver. And again, like you said, I think you said it well, those sort of integrator friendly custom installer features built right in is always a cool thing for me to see. At least I enjoy seeing that from companies like Denon and Marantz. I think it's a good thing. And I do think that is one of the areas where RSM, as we call it, remote systems management, can continue to evolve, is getting outside of the extra little box that you have to install and seeing this more built into more devices on the network.
Right. I do like the Denon form factor on those two receivers. Those are the big type of receivers that you and I like. You look over and you recognize, oh, that's a receiver. But the Marantz ones are kind of like these thin, like maybe 2-3 RU units that that's a lot of power that you can pack into such a small place. Like I've always wished that the receivers that were out there could be at least that form factor, and Marantz is kind of the first company that really went down that road to try and put 5.2 and 7.2 receivers in that form factor. I've always liked that from them, because you always get in those situations where you're in a cabinet and they have not made it to spec, and like you can't fit.
No, that never happens.
You can't fit the 50 pounds of potato in the 10-pound sack that they gave
That's
you.
right.
So, yeah, I always liked those Marantz receivers for that reason. And they were like digital amplifiers anyway, so they didn't produce too terribly much heat. Generally the cable box was hotter, but having all these features built into them is pretty cool too.
Yeah. I used to literally joke that I wanted to get a 3D printer and 3D print like an AV receiver and a network switch and a power conditioner and a Blu-ray player, and have them in our office so that anytime a designer was like, how much room do you need in this cabinet? And then we'd tell them and they'd be like, no, you're not getting that. And I could like take these 3D printed units to their office and be like, here, you try to fit these in that box right there and tell me how well it works, right? It's a hard thing to visually conceptualize, but yeah, there's never enough room. And I think the slimline form factor is really nice. I agree.
Well, you got to remember to 3D print at least like 3 inches of wires, coming off the back.
Oh yeah,
that's going to get piled up back there. But
get the spaghetti piled in the back of the cabinet there.
Yep, absolutely.
Totally.
Well, hey, we talked about Control4 and Snap AV last week, pretty in depth, and I was actually on one of the Resi Week podcast too, and kind of had some thoughts on there too. But since you're back. This news like dropped literally the day after we recorded, which it's always frustrating. Why can't these companies get their act together and get on home tech, right? Like
that's
right. Got a bell. So like I've got to get your take on this, especially around the RSM area, because Control4 is there are 3 major brands that are here: Backpack, which is Pack Edge, Envision from Ihiji, and Oversee from Snap AV, that are kind of merged now into one giant company. And I'm wondering, to me, I have my own thoughts on this, but I'm wondering what you think on this as well.
Yeah, no, I did want to touch on it, and it was tough timing, like you said. The story broke right after we recorded, and then I was gone for a week, so I know this story's been out there for a little while. But yeah, I think it's one of the. There's a ton of questions to ask about this merger. And I think generally speaking, to speak about the merger in broader terms, I know there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? There's a lot of FUD going on right now, and people are really scratching their heads, and there's a lot of different narratives going around about what this means and why it happened and all of that. But I think generally avoiding speculation, because none of us know really for sure how it's going to shape up. But the big takeaway for me overall about this merger is that you have the two big powerhouses in the industry and 2 of the most dedicated companies when it comes to dealers. Like, both of these companies have been very, very dedicated to the professional channel from the outset, and they've been very, very consistent about that. And so I think from that perspective, this is a very exciting story. And I've been lucky to get to know some of the top leadership at both of those companies, and they're run by very, very intelligent people who have a lot of business sense and are very dedicated to the channel and are looking at the big picture. And overall, I think that this is going to be a great thing. So I did want to go on record as saying that. I'm excited about this. I think it's a wonderful thing, and certainly there's going to be some fallout, and there's going to be some winners and losers, as there are going to be any time two companies merge, especially two companies of this size relative to our little channel here, right? So there will be some winners and losers, but ultimately I think the net effect of this merger is going to be a really positive thing for the industry. With regards to remote systems management, I think that's a really interesting one. Control4 purchased IHG a while back, and I think none of us really know. Control4 generally does a very good job of keeping things quiet, and you don't hear a lot of leaks sort of coming out about what's going on until things are ready. And that's typically how Control4 has always done business. It's announce and ship. And so we don't really know what's going on with IHG and Backpack, but you have to believe that getting those two platforms to merge together has probably been a ton of work, and perhaps significantly more than they anticipated, given that we just really haven't heard much of anything. And now you've got the merger with Snap AV. So what becomes of it? You've got your three, if we rewind a year or however, I forget how long it's been since IHG was acquired, but of the four major platforms, IHG, Oversea, Backpack, and Domotz, you now have three of those four under one roof. And so what does that ultimately shake out to be? And I think with the amount of investment and energy that Snap AV has put into Oversea, I think that's really the one to watch. And I think more or less things will probably consolidate, but ultimately, going back to what I said to begin my little soapbox speech here, is both of these companies are very, very dedicated to the dealer channel. And one thing that I will say I do not anticipate regarding RSM is that anybody's going to be sort of left out in the cold. I think whatever strategy they come up with is going to be backwards compatible. And I think whatever you have out in the field, if I were still an integrator today, I would continue deploying what I'm deploying. I would not change my strategy based on speculation. I think have confidence that whatever these two companies decide to do, they're going to make sure that it's backwards compatible. They're going to do right by their dealers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I don't think that there's and this isn't something that happens tomorrow, right?
Right.
This is
totally
these two companies.
Got a
first
lot
of
of
all,
stuff
they're
to figure
not even
out.
merged together yet. Yeah. Second of all, getting a strategy put in place. This is a multi-year thing, because the products that they're going to release at CD this year and possibly even CDN next year are already on the drawing board table. They're already investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into developing products that you're not going to see for another year. So they may come and put some of those on the chopping block, and we may never see them, but because they're duplicated, say over at Control4 or whatever, but is trying to develop a product that is the same as Snap AV, but we're not going to ever know or see or learn about that.
Right.
So what the thing that would be the best for everyone, is if they take these three different versions of the same thing,
yeah,
and figure out how to make them into one. And eventually moving forward, it would just have one particular name. I am not technically versed on what each one of these particular products are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a general idea. It's not very hard to figure out that how they're monitoring different pieces of hardware,
right,
and reporting that back. That's easy. The harder part is doing it at scale and doing it in a way that doesn't break things when you update it. That's much harder than doing a one-off monitoring of a piece of hardware in your network.
Yeah. Well, and I think ultimately, if I can jump in there for just a second, I think really, and we did a deep dive on this at One Vision a couple of years ago, put out an ebook about the landscape, and really took a deep dive at all four of the different platforms. And the big takeaway from that was that there are subtle but important differences. They are important, but they are subtle. And at their core, all of these platforms do the same thing, generally speaking. They monitor devices, and they give you diagnostic information, and they allow you to reboot and tunnel in and do various things. And the difference is don't so much lie in the core functionality as they do in kind of the scope and scale of how far they go with each one of those subsets of functionality. And I think that's going to continue. I think where remote systems management really needs to go next, where the single biggest challenge that we still see out there, and it's pretty rampant, is just difficulty in deploying it. And so I think there are two different layers to that. Number one, it's the software. And so as the software can get better, and I know Domot's has tried to solve this with their acquisition of Fing and network scanning technology and getting better at automatically detecting devices and figuring out what they are. And I think that technology still has a long ways to go to really get to the point where a dealer can flip a switch and turn on monitoring on a site and have it self-configure. Even if it could do that to 80 or 90% would be awesome. Like that would be a huge, huge deal. And the other thing is the physical installation. So you think about, it's one thing on new projects, but it's another to go into an existing project. I was talking with a dealer about this just last week, and they were talking about the challenge of like, well, you get this Watt box or Blue Bolt or whatever that has the built-in reboot capability. But if you're going to a legacy project where it was installed with a different power conditioner, then certainly the wires are all going to be laced in there, and swapping out that power conditioner is not a quick in and out thing. It's several hours of work at a minimum. And that has to be paid for, and the client has to be billed for that. And that makes a barrier to entry for the client. And so that ultimately translates to less remote support capability out there, which we need more of, And so figuring out how to make these things easier to drop in and install. I often think about if you envision like a little iPhone charger, the part that plugs into the wall that has a little USB port. Picture something that size. And if they could somehow figure out how to build the technology into that, where you could literally take like a bag of those and walk around a house and just drop one of those on every device and put it between the power cord and the outlet and have your reboot ability there, that would be awesome. Like that would allow you to just go into a home and without having to rewire everything, you could go to every cabinet, every device in the rack, and literally put everything on a rebootable outlet. And that would be a total game changer. So between the software and the ease of physical deployment, I think those are the two big sort of greenfield opportunities for remote systems management. And I think the core functionality, regardless of what they do with these three platforms, is largely going to stay the same. And that'll be iterative improvement. You're not going to see necessarily big leaps and bounds there. The big leaps and bounds are going to come from the ease of deployment.
Yeah. Yeah, I like your idea. I posted in our Slack back channel, or not the back channel, but the live channel, link to the GoSun. This is probably not pronounced correctly either. The smart plug, GoSun mini Wi-Fi outlet works with Alexa, Google Home, and if no hub required. Remote control your home appliances from anywhere. ETL certified. Only supports 2.4 gigahertz network, 4 pieces.
Yeah.
Product from Amazon, and that is pretty much what you're describing. I think. I think this is technically possible to do what you're talking about, but like you were saying, like there are still issues that you could run into with, like, even the 2.4 gigahertz thing is already an issue in some situations, some installs,
right?
But there's still issues with coming out with something like that. But I think definitely that would be a lot easier than going in and trying to replace an entire laced in Panamax box from a couple of years ago, right? So, yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens with these two companies. From what you're describing too, like the setup and everything. If you step back and think about it, like there could be no more boxes that you even have to worry about with Snap AV and Control 4 at least. I mean, they could put kind of like an oversee process on a Control 4 controller and just have that spin up and read the project and say, okay, these are all the device discovery comes a lot easier if you're using a product where you're dragging and dropping the literal names of the products, like you're dragging them in there. You know the model numbers and the IP, how they talk and everything, and variables that come off of them. So
totally. I think.
Yeah, I mean, so that it could be a great thing for RSM in this respect.
Oh, I agree, and I think that the link between like the programming software, like Composer already knows everything that's in your system. It has to, otherwise it wouldn't be able to control it. So the data's already there, and figuring out how to get that data over into the monitoring side is, I think, something we'll probably see at some point from this as a result of this merger, because now you have Control4 and SnapAV, and SnapAV's never had a control system before. So Oversee didn't have that ability, and now with Control4 coming in, we may see that. I think regarding the getting rid of like the separate external box, I mean, that only does so much. Like, frankly, the box is very easy to install. You just plug it into the power and you put it on the network. So it's really not the physical installation of the box itself. It's when it comes to the physical installation, it's more an issue with power cords. I mean, ultimately, that's what we're talking about here. And those outlets that you put in our chat room, a viable solution. And I think I actually did spend some time sort of noodling this idea a while back and researched, I think, those exact ones. And I think you could make them work. The challenge, though, like, take it one step further. There's the cost thing, which, well, what are they, $33 for a 4-pack?
Yeah, $33.
Yeah, so
incredible.
That's very affordable. So the cost actually isn't really the barrier there. But to me, it's more something that's natively integrated. So if you were to try to use these, you have to, first of all, figure out if the RSM platform can talk to them. Like, I don't know if these are compatible. And then secondly, you have to go in and basically set it up the old, kind of the quote unquote old fashioned way, the way you do it today, where you have to map things to the outlet. And what I'm actually picturing would be, picture that exact form factor, but like the little button you see on the side, imagine that's like a pairing button. And when you plug the device into it, you go, boop, you hit the button, and then the little app comes up and says, what device is this? And you say family room TV. Done. Boom. Family room cable box. Like, just imagine being able to do that. It would be amazing. And so there are ways to get that physical form factor in place right now, but getting that more seamlessly integrated into the monitoring app, I think is the next big opportunity. I'm surprised nobody's done that already.
I wasn't necessarily pointing to these as like a solution. I was pointing to these as an example of what can be done with $33.
Right. Like, from a manufacturing perspective, yeah.
This exists
absolutely.
right now. This is something that's a bestseller on Amazon for $33 and a number one bestseller in electronic outlets. So
right. So go OEM these and tie them right into your Oversee backend and watch the deployment skyrocket. Like, I really think that the physical barrier, that barrier to entry of the physical installation, is one of the big areas where we're not seeing deployment as much as we'd like to as an industry.
Yeah. Interesting stuff. Well, I guess we will have to just kind of wait and see what happens on this one. It's going to be many years coming before we see the fruits of this merger show themselves. So,
yep.
All the links and topics we've discussed tonight can be found on our show notes at HomeTech.fm/259. While you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter, which includes even further analysis, as well as other industry news that may or may not have made the show. Again, that link is HomeTech.fm/259.
Yep, absolutely. And don't forget, you can join us live in the chat room every Wednesday, starting around 7 or 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Find out more by visiting HomeTech.fm/live. We've got several folks hanging out with us in the chat room tonight. We really appreciate it.
Jason, let's take a look at the mailbag this week. I got an interesting question here, and I'm not sure I have an answer for E and R. I think is what we have here. Ian with the R. He said, "What do you guys recommend for resolving intermittent communication delays between two smart home devices? I'm using an Echo Skill to communicate with a Harmony Hub and experience intermittent delays between 10 and 120 seconds." Randomly about 30% of the time. It's always the joke. It works 30% of the time. The activity always completes, but it's randomly delayed. I think he goes on to ask about like IP trace utilities and the little pocket Ethernet device that I talked about on one of the Pick the Weeks one time. I'm not sure that he's looking in the right direction with that. But I'm wondering, the only advice that I have for him, maybe like network related, like are you sure that you have a good network connection? Because it sounds like to me, Jason, it sounds like he's dealing with like cloud related storm activities.
Yeah, that was where my head went as well. Yeah. So I don't know, that would be the first question I would ask Ian if we had him on, would be, are other parts of the internet experiencing this sort of slowness 30% of the time? Like, do you 30% of the time have a web page take 10 to 20 seconds to load, which would otherwise load like instantly? That would be the first thing to check. Presumably, if that was also happening, he probably would have mentioned it. Maybe not. It's hard to say. But I think it does sound potentially like that could be the issue, is a connection to the cloud server, because as we've talked about numerous times on the show, all of these devices have to go up to the cloud in order to then come back down and do what they need to do in the home. And it's actually remarkable when you stop and think about that, how quickly these things happen most of the time, and where that data is going and coming back to make that happen is pretty incredible. But yeah, this is, I'm sure, really frustrating. So yeah, maybe some network troubleshooting would be in order, but it could be an issue with, somebody in the chat room said Harmony start there.
I wasn't going to say it. Oh,
yes,
I was going to say it.
Yeah. So that, it could be something, unfortunately, with the hub itself that could also be causing it. So
yeah,
I think, I don't know if you have any recommendations. Nothing jumps to mind for me as far as specifically, like, if he does want to sort of go down this road of testing the network, what's sort of like a good, maybe a good or simple, straightforward way to do that?
I think first it's probably a good idea to check maybe your DNS. Check how well your DNS is working. A lot of people do the 1.1.1.1 and or 8888. Is that it? 8844 for the DNS. And a lot of people stick with most people stick with their ISP's DNS, which could be, Comcast, Verizon, whatever. So maybe check out the only thing that I could think that'd be really slowing this down, because it's not like Amazon servers are going super slow. They have millions of these devices out there. So I would kind of rule Amazon out, just not ruled out completely, but not my first choice is what the problem is. Harmony, you would think that you would hear a lot of issues about Harmony hubs taking 120 seconds to respond to commands. So yeah. I'm wondering if you have maybe some DNS issues. And there's a couple of tests over on grc.com. I listened to Security Now podcast, and they have a utility. Here it is. Under their freeware and then utilities, they have a DNS benchmark tool it's a Windows thing. So you kind of have to get your hands dirty and run Windows to run this. But it does work really well, and it can go out and check a bunch of different DNS servers for you and tell you which one's the fastest one that from your house out, and that may solve some of his issues. I'm not really. This could be anything. I mean, it could be. Yeah. It could be your ISP is giving you a bad connection in. I mean, I really don't know. But I would start with this DNS test too, just to check it out, because everything that's done, literally everything that's done in the internet, starts with the DNS lookup. And if your computer it takes a while to make a specific call out to the internet, it's usually because of these DNS things. So I would check there first. If anybody in the audience listening has any recommendations, shoot them over to us at feedback@HomeTech.fm, and we'll try and get back to this one too if we see anything that looks promising.
Yeah, and one other quick thing that Ian, you could try is domotes. Like, if you want to roll up your sleeves and get a domotes device and put it on your network, that at least would give you some basic network monitoring. And I know, like, I was having a problem. It turned out to be the modem itself with my ISP was going bad, and we couldn't tell what was going on. And we had the domotes device, and we could see that the network speeds were just randomly dipping, like, way down by like 80-90%, just randomly throughout the day. And ultimately, that was plugged basically straight into the router. So we knew that, there was something going on there. And so, looking into we were just talking about RSM and systems, remote systems management and those sorts of options out there. That could be an affordable option. They have I think they still have the self-install option
for the
out there that you could,
that
you could look into doing. Put that on your network, and that would give you some charts of over time how your network is looking. And if that's all looking good and steady, and your speeds are solid, and you're not getting a bunch of disconnects, then you've probably got an issue with the hardware.
Yeah,
or the local network.
It's a tough one. It's really I would say local network. It could be hardware. This is a tough one to really track down and see what's going on. Just because there's so many variables involved here when you go outside and then back in, and that's why you're seeing a lot of these companies, even Google. It's Apple's inside the house. Google is coming back inside the house and locking their platform down. But when you're running, Harmony or Alexa, you're going to be having to deal with going out to the cloud and back, and that's going to introduce latency. 120 seconds though is not something I would like very much. So I wonder if like a general reset on maybe the Harmony hub, like if there's a way to do some kind of like complete reset and then load all your programming back on there. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the line very much. I'm sure there are people in our hub that could tell us, but if you could just like flash that back to factory settings and then rebuild your system easily, that may be something you could do too.
Yeah. Yep. All right, cool. Well, thank you for reaching out, Ian. And if we hear anything from our listeners, we will definitely pass that along. Moving on here, Seth, a gem of a pick of the week this week, coming to us from a friend of the show, Chris Gamble, over in the UK. And the quote here is, "My fiber broadband isn't as fast as I'd hoped." And the picture goes on to show a fiber, I forget what these things are called, ONS or
ONT.
ONT. Yeah. It's the ONT on the side of the house, or the point of entry for the fiber. And it's got a splice with like the little jelly bean
the 3M,
splice
3M, yeah.
3M splice things on a fiber connection.
Clearly someone came in not understanding.
Tells me that's not going to work.
Yeah. The little 3M jelly connectors aren't going to go from fiber to copper very well for you. Clear. I don't. Chris didn't tell me. He said this was on Facebook somewhere, but he posted it in the hub. It looks like it was moved over. And somebody came along and said, "Well, these look like those little telephone lines that we always use."
Right.
Let's right into them. Yep. Not going to work, guys.
Yeah, that one probably didn't work out very well. So, good find, Chris Gamble. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, picks of the week, or ideas for a show, guest, or topic, give us a shout. Our email address is feedback@HomeTech.fm. Once again, that is feedback@HomeTech.fm, or hop over to the website, HomeTech.fm/feedback, and fill out the online form.
We want to give a big thank you to everyone who supports the show, but especially those who are able to financially support the show through our Patreon page. If you don't know about our Patreon page, head on over to HomeTech.fm/support to learn how you can support HomeTech for as little as $1 a month. Any pledge gets over $5 gets you a shout out on the show, but every pledge gets you an invite to our private Slack channel, The Hub, where you and other supporters of the show can gather every day and post pictures like this that we've seen.
That's right.
People trying to splice fiber optic cable with copper. Jason, we actually, I know Don is a supporter of the show. I can't look back historically and see what he's done, but Don Kearns updated his Kearns has updated his pledge
I think,
to $5, or I don't know which directions he's coming from, without like logging into Patreon and figuring it out. But as part of our robot invite system, if you update or delete your pledge, we get a little notification in our Slack channel too. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know which way it came from, but thank you, Don. Thank you very much for supporting the show. The $5 level.
Well, Don just so happens to be in the chat room with us tonight.
Oh, okay.
And so a couple of updates here. Scotch locks apparently are what those little jelly things are called that we were talking. And yes, they do not work on fiber. Scotch locks, though, if you're curious what we're talking about. And yeah, Don said he updated that his card was expired. I think Don was a $5 supporter before, but hey, bonus Don, we'll give you a second shout out on air because we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. The support means a lot to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Don.
Cool. And if you want to help out the show but can't do so financially, we would definitely appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or a positive rating in your podcast app of choice. Those reviews definitely help more people find the show. So if you're a fan of what we do here on the podcast, take a couple of minutes to leave us a review. That would go a really long ways.
Sounds good. Jason, next week we got an interview coming up, it looks like.
We do. We've got Christopher Carney. He's the CEO and co-founder of Abode, very popular DIY security system. So definitely look forward to diving in with him. DIY security is definitely one of those categories that's really just exploded in recent years. And I don't have Abode at my house. I've got a DIY system though, and I love the category. I think it's a really interesting entry point for a lot of people who are looking into the smart home. So look forward to chatting with Chris and learning more about Abode systems.
Sounds good. Well, Jason, have a good rest of the week and a good weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Sounds good, Seth. Take care.